So today I'm going to be learning about driving in Canada, and for me I think that driving in Canada would be a wonderful experience if you're doing like a long road trip across the country. One of the most scenic places, one of the most scenic drives I think would be imaginable. And today we're going to be learning about 6 surprising things about driving in Canada. So yeah, if you're from Canada, tell me how relatable these are to you as well. I'm sure there's a lot more unique things about driving in your country, so tell me if there's any that are not mentioned on this video that you think are worth knowing. But yeah, let's watch this one first of all.
Hello there! In this video, we're going to talk about Canadian driving quirks. We all know that Canada is a huge country. In fact, it's the second largest country in the world. And that means that the distances are enormous. So chances are you're much more likely to have a car when you move to Canada. After all, according to statistics, an average Canadian household owns 1.5 cars.
And even if you live in a big city with a well-developed public transport system like Toronto, you would still probably need a car to be able to get away during the weekends to enjoy the beautiful nature of Canada.
That's true.
So naturally, you will have to get a driver's license, and you will also have to learn about the driving peculiarities in Canada.
And that's what we're going to talk about. 6 interesting facts you should know about driving in Canada. Let's jump right into it.
Just to say, first of all, they mentioned public transport in the big cities. How is that? Is there good infrastructure in the big cities in Canada? Is there any places that have better public transport than others? Are there any that are known for having bad public transport? Tell me more about that.
So first of all, you should know that Canadian signs are different from European and Asian. They're different in shapes, they're different in symbols. So if you are used to your local signs, we highly recommend you read a road sign manual before you travel to Canada. Some signs can be very confusing, especially those in relation to parking. To me, it's a whole separate chapter that needs further studying. Jeez. This picture is a typical parking indication on a Montreal street. Now go figure what exactly this is supposed to say and whether or not you can park here. If you're like me, I would just give up and go ahead and find a quiet street with less parking signs on it. If you don't want to give up, my suggestion is to pay attention to the arrows. They usually indicate whether you're not supposed to park before or after the sign pole. Canada is a country filled with animals, province? So be prepared to see signs like this. And there is a certain place in heaven reserved for these marvelous signs.
Let me just see these. What are these? Like, that looks like maybe sitting at some sort of event. I don't know, yeah, why there's a sun there. Maybe it gets too sunny, I don't know. This one's pretty cool with all the maple leaves. Tell me why there's 3 missing. That one again, holding a vase. This looks like some sort of barn. This one, I've definitely seen this big tower sort of thing when looking at the remote, smaller towns of Canada. That looks like it's from like a children's fantasy novel or something. And this one, yeah, I think that's self-explanatory, but that looks quite violent, honestly.
Hell, it depends on how you look at it.
Traffic lights are also pretty funky. When I came to Canada, I was completely confused by the pedestrian traffic lights. And in fact, as it turns out, I was kind of breaking the rules. Some lights would just have a red hand, and sometimes the hand would be blinking. So naturally, I was crossing the street sometimes when the red hand would be blinking because I thought it's almost like the hand is kind of waving at you and says like, hey, cross the street. Well, I was wrong. Needless to say, the red hand in any shape or form means do not cross the street. One should also not get confused by the green light because the regular green traffic lights are generally reserved for vehicles. So if you want to cross the street and you see a green light and there's no pedestrian light nearby, it might not be safe to cross the street or to cross the intersection in that area. You have to find a traffic light that has a walking or a pedestrian traffic light. And to make things even more confusing, in British Columbia, for instance, there's a flashing green globe light that's used at an intersection or pedestrian crossing, which means that you can cross and then the cars are required to stop to let you cross the street. To add a cherry on this traffic light cake, the red light in Canada doesn't always mean what you expect it to. For instance, generally in North America, you are allowed to turn right on the red light, provided that it is safe to do so. However, Montreal Island, and only the Montreal Island, is the only place in practically entire North America where you're not allowed to turn right on the red light. So my general advice
actually
here
never
is
knew
to
that was a
always
choice
read the
anyway.
rules of the province and the city that you're traveling to. And coming back to the pedestrian lights, you should always watch out for a white walking man if you want to cross the street. I shall not comment on the fact that the walking man is white, and to be honest, this color is not the most visible choice of color, especially if it's bright outside, and especially
In the UK we have a
in
red and
winter,
green man.
during the snowfall, when everything is white. It becomes very difficult to distinguish this light in the
Why
background.
don't they make it green?
Canadians are predominantly cautious and respectful drivers. If Canadians see something unexpected happening on the road, they would usually slow down. And if you're driving on a Canadian highway and you see someone on hazard lights, you would typically just change lanes to keep a distance. Canadian drivers are generally very cautious, which is a good thing, because you feel safe on the road that no one will make unexpected and sudden moves and just behave stupidly on the road. Canadian drivers also generally respect the laws and signs, keeping up with all the stop signs, speed limits, so their driving is predictable and you know what to expect. Well, of course there are occasional daredevils storming through on highways or revving up their cars trying to overcompensate for a lack of other skills, but that's more exception than the rule. The only exception to this rule would probably be the province of Quebec. Drivers there to me seem a little bit reckless and more disrespectful.
Oh, is that true? That's what I was actually going to ask. Is there anywhere that's known for having better drivers or worse drivers? I feel like any country I've lived in, there's always like a reputation of one city or one area that has bad driving or bad drivers. Is it Quebec? Is that fair? Is it anywhere else?
I live in Toronto, and whenever I travel to Montreal, I notice two things instantly. People like cutting you off on the highway, and they don't usually use turning lights.
Shovel and brush are mandatory accessories in some provinces.
That makes
If you live in
sense.
Quebec and some northern provinces where low temperatures and large snowfalls are common, having a brush and a shovel in the back of your car becomes vital. And if you don't have a shovel or a brush in your trunk and the snow starts falling, you might end up in a situation where you're not even able to drive your car out of your parking spot. When I
Have you
lived in
ever been in
Montreal,
that
I would
situation?
drive to work in the morning, park my car in the parking spot, and go to my office. And sometimes during the day, a huge snowstorm would come and it would cover up my car completely. So I'd have to spend 20 or 30 minutes sometimes just shoveling the snow just so that my car could leave the driveway. And snowfalls like this happen in northern provinces and the province of Quebec pretty frequently. So my advice to you guys, make sure you always have a shovel and a brush so that you can drive safely and drive quickly out
That's
of your
one
driveway.
thing I definitely don't miss
Another
about
thing you should
Scottish
know is that
winters.
honking is not
Waking up
very
early,
common in
scraping your car.
Canada. In other countries, honking can be used as a means of communication between drivers. For example, when you want to greet someone, or you want to alert someone about something specific you're about to do, or just to increase awareness for other vehicles. For instance, when you're driving on narrow mountain roads. In Canada, however, honking is not very common. In fact, honking is considered to increase agitation in other drivers. In some provinces, you may even be issued a fine for honking for no apparent reason. If you find yourself downtown of a busy city like Toronto or Montreal, you would probably hear it a little more often, especially during the rush hour traffic, but even then you'd probably be surprised by how tame that honking is compared to Europe or Asia. The only exception is
Asia,
Prince Edward
here is
Island, where
insane,
there is a
man.
law that requires you to honk when you're passing another vehicle, which makes sense to me as it increases awareness.
Car theft in Canada is also a thing. Just like in any country, Canada is not special when it comes to car theft. In fact, car theft has been on the rise in Canada in the last 5 years and has become even more prevalent since the chip and car shortages. These days, some used cars can cost more than a brand new car. Some research shows that the most popular cars for car theft are Honda Civic, Honda CR-V, and the Toyota Highlander. Most recent car theft reports indicate that car thieves are becoming more and more sophisticated. And unfortunately, it's also getting easier to steal a modern car that relies heavily on technology. For instance, the push button to start. And when stolen, the cars get either pulled apart for parts to resell, or they get shipped to other countries for sale. And if you think your car is not cool enough to be stolen, the stuff that you might potentially keep inside your car might be just cool enough for the thieves. I myself was a victim of a car theft a couple of years ago back in Montreal, in a neighborhood just 10 minutes away from downtown. I left for about an hour, I came back to only realize that all the compartments in my car was completely wiped, my backpack was torn apart, and my laptop, some cash, some expensive sunglasses, and a bunch of other things were stolen from my car. I left my backpack visible on the back seat of my car, and that was my mistake. And I've learned the lesson. Never leave any visible items inside your car. Always hide it, either in your glove compartment or in your trunk where no one can see it. And if it's something very valuable and expensive to you, just bring it with you. Don't leave it inside your car. And in order to protect yourself from car theft, always park your car in a well-lit place, or even better, in a garage, and use additional anti-theft devices to either keep the thieves away or to keep your car locked and protected. So here we are. These are the 6 interesting facts, at least the facts that we find interesting, about Canadian driving.
Yeah, that seems pretty cool, man. Yeah, it's quite different. Those signs, I've not seen a lot of them anywhere, so again, that might vary between the provinces in Canada, so tell me if you've seen all of those signs. Is there any signs that you've seen in your province that you've not seen anywhere else? But in general, it looks like Canada, yeah, apart from being a beautiful place to drive, is quite a enjoyable place to drive. Everybody's respectful, they're quiet, like a lack of honking. Sounds good to me, especially living in Asia where it's just so noisy, so stressful to drive. Seems like quite a peaceful way to get about in Canada, apart from maybe the fear of getting your car stolen or stuff like that. Has that ever happened to you? But yeah, tell me if this is true to life for you. Do you think driving in Canada is fun? Is it not? Tell me what your opinion, what your experience of it is. Thanks.